Okay, so what I'd like to do today is I want to go back in the Gemara where the Gemara begins to discuss the Amatraxin, this Amma wall that stood between the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the Heichal, and discussion on the first Beis HaMikdash versus the second Beis HaMikdash. And as we learn it, we'll pause, we'll at the right point, we'll stop to look at the Rebbe's comment, and then continue the Gemara, and hopefully make it to the end of this discussion, which is the two dots on the next page, Gimel Amud Beis. So it might be a little bit of material, but a lot of it we covered last week, so we'll be able to move through it, I think, a little bit quicker. Okay. So we can begin with 4 lines from the bottom of the page on Gimel Amud Aleph. The 6th word is lememra. So the Gemara concluded by telling us, going through all the details of exactly how a wall is to be built and which type of wall should be built in what manner. And as we learned from the Mefarshim, from Rashi, and from others, I think we saw also from Rosh, that this is nageya. It's important to halacha when a person promises to build a certain kind of wall, he has to do so up to a certain standard. Now, having said that, the Gemara now makes the following observation. Lamema is that to suggest the begazis, that if you're building a wall made of gazis, which is the smoothed out stones, then the b'chol dal amis, every 4 amis, goiva of height, yahav patiyah chamisha, if it has, relative to those 4 amis, 5 tfachim width, then koyi will stand. Eloi, if it doesn't, loy koyi won't stand. This is what it seems to suggest. And we can look at Rashi on the side. Lamemra, says Rashi. We learned in our Mishnah that begazis, when it comes to the wall made of gazis, the unsmoothed, the smoothed out stone, zednois and tfachayim mechza. This one gives 2.5 tfachim, the 2 neighbors. The zednois and tfachayim mechza, the other neighbor gives 2.5 tfachim. The katani seifa, and the end we're going to learn later in our Mishnah, the Mishnah Daf Daled, Daf Hey, I'm sorry. Later, when the Mishnah continues, it's going to tell us Machayv Noisar, Liv Noisar, they are obligated to build it Ad Daled Amis up to 4 Amis for Hezek Re'iyah, as the halach is. Now, Lafi Cheshben Zeh, according to this calculation, Lagoiva Shmoina, if you were to make the wall 8 Amis high, Sarich Yud Tvachim Reichav, you'd need 10 Tvachim, because each 5 Tvachim require, each 4 Amis of height requires 4 Tvachim of width. That's the seeming implication. So then, says the Gemara, if so, but third to last line of the Gemara, amatraxin, but you have the amatraxin. What's the amatraxin? Atraxin, says Rashi. Amatraxin, the binyan shloima of the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash that Shlomo Melech built, the first Beis HaMikdash, the gazis hava. It was made out of these gazis, these smoothed out stones. The ksiv, as the pasuk says, avnei gazis, stones that were gazis, smoothed out stones. And the height of this amatraxin, this height of this wall between the base of the Kodesh Kadoshim and the Heichal, was 30 amas high. The ein oivav, and its thickness was no more than ella ama, only 1 ama, lahavdol ben Heichal, to separate between the Heichal and the Kodesh Kadoshim. So what's the problem? So it says the Gemara weiter, third to last line, the 4th word, dava gavoya klosin amsa. It was 30 amas high, v'lo have a patia, and its thickness is nothing other ella than shis pushim. That's how I pronounce that word. The 6 tvachim. The amas in the Beis HaMikdash were 6 tvachim. I think I mentioned this last week. This discussion exactly how big an amma is, but in the Beis HaMikdash it was 6 tvachim. The come then it stood. Obviously it stood. So according to the cheshbon we made before, that every 4 amas requires 5 tvachim. 30 amas requires much more. Last week someone did the calculation for us, but it's much more than 5 tvachim. For if 8 amas need 10 tvachim, then 30 amas need much more. And here you have a 30 amas high wall and it stands on 6 tvachim. This is the Gemara's kasha. How could it physically stand? Says the Gemara. The answer is kivan di'ika tefach yiseda, because it has an extra tefach, koyi it stands. Okay. The extra tefach gives it the capacity to stand much higher. Says Rashi, the ikar tefach chisera, it has an extra tefach. And because of this extra width of tefach, motzi la gvoya tuva, you can raise it up much higher. And you don't require to give each 4 ames its own 5 tefachim. Okay, it seems to be rather simple and logical. Right? I'm not an engineer, but it would make sense that it's not as if you have to have 4 tefachim for each 10 ames. Each 10 ames, as you get higher, you need less and less width, as it were. At the beginning, you need more width to get its original endurance, and then as you build up, you don't need much more. You don't need that much more width to give it extra endurance. Okay. The Gemara continues, and here's where the Rebbe is going to comment. Over Mikdash Sheni, and the second base in Mikdash, my time. What's the reason like Avad Amatraxin? Why didn't they make a wall an Amma wide like this, like the first base in Mikdash? So answers the Gemara, Ki Kai. When does it stand on a wall of 6 tefachim wide, which is the Amma of the base in Mikdash? When can a wall stand with that kind of width? That's only betlasin. With 30 tefachim koi, it will stand. But fei, much more than that, which is the second base in Mikdash, which stood at 100 amas high, loi koi, it won't stand. Yeah? Now, minalon, how do we know that the second base in Mikdash was taller than the first base in Mikdash? How do you know it was taller? Because the pasuk says, the greatness of the glory of this second house will be greater than the second base of Mikdash, greater than the first base of Mikdash. And Rav and Shmuel were discussing the meaning of this pasuk. But Amrillah and others say it wasn't Rav or Shmuel that were discussing this pasuk, but rather it was Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lezer who were discussing this pasuk. But either way, the discussion is had on this verse as what exactly the meaning is, that the glory of the house of the second house is greater than the first. Is the binyan. One says it's in the physical structure, and as Rashi says, the last Rashi on the page, it stood 100 amas high, as it says in the Mishnah, it's Masech Midas. The other one says that the greatness of the second Beis Mikdash was Bishanim in years. Top Begimel Amud Beis. And Rashi says there, what does Bishanim mean? Bishanim in years, Bayis Rishon Amud Dalad Meis. The Eser, the first Beis Mikdash stood for 410 years. Ubaya Sheni, and the second Beis Mikdash stood Dalad Meis Eser 420. So 10 years longer and 70 amas taller. And the Gemara so this is a discussion between Rav and Shmuel or Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lezer. They seem to be, I don't know if they're disagreeing, but they're bringing different angles. And the Gemara says va'asi laha, and we maintain both of these views. So this is, at this point, this is the Gemara's answer. That why is it that the second Beis Mikdash didn't have an amatraxin? Because it's too tall. Because it's 100 amas high. And what's the raya? It's too tall. What's the raya that it was taller than the second Beis Mikdash? Because the pasuk says it was greater, and at least according to one reasoning, it was greater in height, about not 30 amas but 100 amas. This is the Gemara's answer at this point, which would mean somewhere between 30 amas and 100 amas is the cutoff for how tall a wall could be if it were to stand only on 5 tvachim. 6 tvachim, I'm sorry. Right? 5 tvachim goes to 4 amas. 6 tvachim doesn't just take you, comparatively, it takes you much higher. It takes you at least to 30, maybe higher, but certainly to 30.
The lashon of the Gemara makes it sound like any higher than 30 to me. That's how I read it.
Yeah, you can read it that way. That exactly at 30 it stands. Yeah, that would make sense. That's a fair point. But up to 30 will stand. Anything beyond 30 will need more width. This is the Gemara. Now, before we get to the Rebbe's comment, actually, let's look at the Shiטmim Kabetzes. So in the pictures I sent you in the group, it is, I think it's the first picture I sent you. Yeah, it's the first picture there. So it's the Shiטmim Kabetzes quoting the Tosafos Harash. And we're going to see in a minute that a lot of the Rebbe's Sikha is going to be based on this Tosafos Harash. That's why I figured to learn it, and we're going to see also a Tosafos that it's also connected to. That's why we're going to learn at least passages of that Sikha, even though most of the Sikha is talking about the primary sugya of Amatraction in Yuma, and most of the Sikha discusses that Gemara, but as you will see, a few places that addresses our Gemara as well. So let's see this Tosafos Rashi here as quoted in the Shitim Mekubetzes. Now, even though the Tosafos Rashi is quoting the Gemara later, the Gemara says later that even a 30 tefachim, even a 30 amos high wall, in addition to having the extra tefach, 6 tefachim, it also has to have a roof to hold it in place. Even though that's what the Tosafos Rashi is commenting on, nonetheless, his comment still is appropriate here as well. He asks, if you're going to ask, the pasuk anyway said that Gadol Yiyah covered the bayis hazeh. The pasuk already said that the second Beis Hamikdash is bigger than the first Beis Hamikdash. So you're anyways not maintaining the same standard. So if it's important, and seemingly it is, to have a wall between the Heichal and the Beis Hamikdash, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, I'm sorry, and you're making it taller, so it's 100 amos, so make it wider. What's the problem? Instead of it being a 6 tefachim wide wall, make it 10 tefachim, however wide it has to be to reach 100 amos, make it that wide. Why not make it wider? It's his question. It's a pashta kasha. You're anyways changing the dimensions. So says the Tosafos Rashi and the Shitim Mekubetzes. We might suggest that they can't do, because the pasuk says Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alei hiskel. Everything is done in writing based on the way Hashem gave it to me. So the prophet is saying that the Beis Hamikdash cannot. The pasuk is basically saying the Beis Hamikdash cannot be different than the specifications Hashem gave. And this is what the Gemara says in Zvachim, in Perek Kachim. They're not able to make the Mizbeach any wider. Unless they find the pasuk which allows them to do so. I didn't look up the Gemara, so I'm not really sure what the context is. The Dorish and Dorish, and therefore you can expound on the verse to say you're allowed to make it wider. But in height you may add. Because the pasuk says this is going to be greater. So on the one hand, the pasuk says to maintain the exact standard of the Beis Hamikdash, coming exactly from Hashem. So even as you make the second Beis Hamikdash, it has to retain the standard of the first Beis Hamikdash. On the other hand, the pasuk also says the second Beis Hamikdash is greater. So how do you maintain both these psukim? So explains the Tosafos Rashi. In height, that's how you make it greater. But in order to maintain the standard, that you don't deviate from the measures Hashem gave, you can't make the length or width greater. You can only make the height greater. Right? But length and width, if you can't add. Because of that pasuk. The pasuk which says, Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alei hiskel. Because, and he gives the reason for this, because you cannot change the ground as it's been sanctified. This ground has been sanctified as Holy of Holies. You can't make it wider. This ground has been sanctified as Heichel. You can't make it wider. You can't make it narrower. So this is the Skadish Far Ulam. This has been made the Ulam, the Heichel, to make it for a Heichel. And likewise, the distance between Azar and Mizbeach, each one giving the ground on the Beis Hamikdash has different levels of holiness. And once that has been established based on the words of Hashem, it can't be changed. But the height, you can go as high as want. Ilav, the only reason why in Zvachim apparently they said they made the Mizbeach wider is the Ashkach Kra, because they have a pasuk that allows them to. But the height, my Kra, they can add based on the pasuk which says, Gadol Yiyah cover the bayis hazeh, this second Beis Hamikdash has got to be greater. Okay. So this is a simple explanation, and this is going to become the basis for the Sikha. So let's look at that. Yeah, so it's clear so far. The Gemara says that the reason why they couldn't make a wall between the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the second Beis Hamikdash is because it was too tall. And the Rosh asks, why can't you make it wider? If you anyways making it different dimensions than the first Beis Hamikdash, why not make it wider? Make a wider wall so it can stand 100 amos high? Answers, you cannot change the width and length of the Beis Hamikdash. The ground has been made sanctified holy under its circumstances. It must remain that way. The space of the Kodesh HaKadoshim must remain the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The ground, the space of the Ulam, the Heichel must remain the Heichel, and so on and so forth. But the height, the pasuk says Gadol. The pasuk says make the second Beis Hamikdash greater, and therefore they made it much taller. Yeah, this is the Tosafos Rashi. So now look at the first picture I sent you. And this is from the Sikha. So if you have, if you want to use it from inside, you have it in Likuta Sikhas like Chelik Lamed Vav, or in this Sefer where they collected the Rebbe's Biyurim on the Beis Hamikdash. If you have Chelik Lamed Vav, it's Sikha, it's Truma, Parshas Truma Sikha Gimel. So if you have Likuta Sikhas Parshias, then take Truma and look at Chelik Lamed Vav Sikha Gimel. So Aleph, the Rebbe says like this. The first paragraph I'm just quoting there because it's based on the Rambam, and the Rebbe is quoting the Rambam. This is a very nice book. They took the actual Rambam Hilchos Beis HaBechira, like the Rambam's laws of Beis Hamikdash. They put it in the front, and they put all the Rebbe's Biyurim on the Beis Hamikdash. In the back, they have added stuff. It's a very, very Yishmaka Sefer. Like you learn about the Beis Hamikdash with the Rebbe's Biyurim. It's very nice.
Sorry, I missed where to find it in Likuti Sichos.
Chelik Lamed Vav, Truma, Parshas Truma,
Yeah.
Sikha Gimel.
Truma. Okay.
Truma.
Thank you.
So Aleph, Kostav Rambam. The Rambam writes the Hilchos Beis HaBechira and the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. It's in the WhatsApp group also. The pictures there. The Bayis Rishon in the first Beis Hamikdash, Haya Koisel, there was a wall, Mavdil, that separated between HaKodesh, between the holy, that is the area where the menorah was, with the Heichal, like we're calling it, Ubein HaKodesh Kadoshim, and the Holy of Holies. Oiv of Amma, its thickness was 1 amma. That's the way it was in the first Beis Hamikdash, as we learned in our Gemoro. The Kivin Shabonu Abayis Sheni, and once they built the second Beis Hamikdash, Nistapik Lehem. Now most of this is based on the Gemara in Yuma, but you'll see one part where it connects to our Gemara here in Basra. Nistapik Lehem, they're in doubt. And Oiv HaKoisel, if the thickness of the wall, that amma, Hayim Midas HaKodesh, was it part of the holy? The Heichal, or was it part of the Holy of Holies? So they weren't sure where the Amma belonged. Right, so that's the Kodesh Kedoshim is, what is it? It's 10 Ammas long, let's say. I don't remember. It's 20? No, sorry, 20 Ammas long. Yeah. And the Heichal is 40 Ammas long. And they weren't sure where this Amma came from the 20 of the Kodesh Kedoshim, or the 40 of the Heichal. And because they were in doubt, therefore, Asu Kodesh HaKadoshim Oivav Esim Amma, they made the Holy of Holies its full 20 Ammas as it's supposed to be. Tmima is complete. But Asu HaKodesh Arboim Amma, they made the Heichal 40 Amma. Tmima is complete as it's supposed to be. Now, Vehinichu Amma Yisera, and they added an extra Amma. They left an extra Amma, Bein HaKodesh, between the Heichal, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Holy of Holies. And they didn't build a wall at all, as we learned in our Gemara. Our Gemara is the one that informs us that they didn't build a wall. The Gemara in Yuma, I think, also says it, but the Gemara doesn't give the reason. Here, the Gemara gives the reason why they didn't build the wall in the second Beis Hamikdash, because it was too tall. Right? But over here, the Rambam said they left an empty space. They made 2 curtains, one on the side of the Kodesh Kadashim, at that end of the Amma, the Achas, Misad HaKodesh, and one on the other end of the Amma, closer to the Heichal, to the Kodesh. Ubeneim Amma, and in between was an empty, vacant Amma. Keneged, corresponding to Oiva HaKoisel, the thickness of the wall, Shohaya Barishan, that wasn't the first Beis Hamikdash. So because they don't know where to put this Amma, whether it belongs as part of the 40 of the Kodesh Kadashim, or whether it belongs to the 20 of the Kodesh Kadashim, or the 40 of the Kodesh, the 40 of the Holy, therefore they left it blank, they left it empty, giving each, they made an extra Amma, giving each, the Heichal its full 40, and the Kodesh Kadashim its full 20.
But doesn't a Gemara say that it was 6 tfachim?
6 tfachim, okay, yeah. The Amma is 6 tfachim wide.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now, if you have the Sikha, if you're looking at the pictures, go to the next picture. But if you're looking at the Sikha, then go to the next column where it says L'chura. U'L'chura. U'L'chura tzorach iyon. Okay, so he brings up the Kesef Mishnah. We're not going to get into that though. But he says it's L'chura tzorach iyon, and this is where our Shiטmim comes in. L'chura, we have to understand. How are you allowed to add the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash? Everything is written by the hand of Hashem. So how could you add the dimension? That's the pasuk that the Shiטmim is quoted. And we're going to see in a moment in the footnote, the Rebbe is actually going to cite to that, to our Shitim Mekabetzis. And the change that the Rambam is suggesting, that an extra amma is left between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the change that's made between the dimensions that Hashem instructs, 20 amas Kodesh HaKadoshim and 40 amas for Kodesh, and now the Rambam is adding an extra amma between, is B'shnei Dvarim is on two accounts. Number one, the Bayis Rishon, in the first Beis Midrash, the two sections, the Heichel and the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Yachad, together, Samach Amma. Their length was a full 60 Amma. By Amma Traxin, and this Amma Traxin in the first Beis Midrash, this wall, either it was the first Amma of the 20 belonging to the Kodesh Kedoshim, Ha'alef, the first one, or it was the 40th Amma of the Kodesh. But the total of the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kedoshim was 60 Amma. There was no separation between the space that ends the ground. We're talking about the ground that's holy, that the Shitim Mekabetzis said. In the first Beis Hamikdash, on the ground, if you were to remove the Beis Hamikdash and you walk on the ground, there's no space left vacant between the end of the ground that's holy on the level of Heichel and the beginning of the ground that's holy on the level of Kodesh Kedoshim. It goes straight from one to the next. And the question was where this Amma was. Was this wall in the first Amma of the 20 Kodesh Kedoshim, or the first Amma, or the last Amma of the Kodesh Heichel? And now comes the two changes, according to the Rambam. Aleph, number one, change number one is the Kodesh Mem Amis Nimus. The Kodesh Kedoshim had 20 Amas in its completion. The Kodesh, the Heichel, had 40 Amas in completion. Ubeinehem, and between them, have 6 Amma Yeseda. You had an extra Amma, you had a space of an Amma. Which means, in the first Beis Hamikdash, the sum total of the Kodesh and the Heichel together was 60 Amma. And in the second Beis Hamikdash was 61 Amma. So you have a change in dimension. Number one, not in the individual space for the Kodesh Kedoshim and the Heichel, that's the same, 40-20, but in the combination of the two is different. The first Beis Hamikdash, if you walked from the beginning of the Heichel to the end of the Kodesh Kedoshim, you walked 60 Amma, and the second Beis Hamikdash, according to Rambam, you were walking 61 Amma. Change number one. Change number two, there was a difference in the physical, which part of the ground did the Beis Hamikdash stand on? Which physical ground did the Heichel and the first Beis Hamikdash stand on? Which physical ground did the Kodesh Kedoshim stand on in the first Beis Hamikdash? One of those two is off in the second Beis Hamikdash. It's different physical ground by an Amma. And this is what the Rebbe cites to our Shitim Mekabetzis. Look in footnote 12. The Shitim Mekabetzis, Basra, Gimel Beis. See the Shitim Mekabetzis in Basra, Daf Gimel the Beis, our Gemara. B'Shem Tosafos Harash, in the name of Tosafos Harash. We just read this. When it comes to the length and the width, if they were not allowed to add to the dimensions, even though the height they were allowed to, but the width and the length they're not allowed to. Mahai from this pasuk, which says the pasuk in Divrei, I think it's Divrei Yomim of Hakol B'Ksav Miyad Hashem Ali Haskel. You cannot change the physical ground that had been sanctified as space for the Heichel. And you cannot change the physical ground that's been sanctified as Kodesh Kedoshim. It was sanctified to be made into the Heichel. And likewise, and likewise the space between the entrance and the Azara and the beginning of the Mizbeach, which is another level of holiness, except for the fact that the Gemoro and Zvachim found the pasuk allowing them to make the Mizbeach wider. But according to the Rambam, the physical ground that has been allotted as Heichel is now changed, which seemingly you cannot do. Valderas of the Kitzer, the Me'idi Liyumakan, and the Me'idi Iyuma says a similar thing, very Bekitzer. The physical ground cannot be changed, as described in the pasuk that is done by prophets. Because this is the Rebbe's Kasha on the Rambam, based on our Gemara, really. Or based on the Mekabetzis explaining our Gemara. Okay, now let's go to the Rebbe's beer. The Rebbe's beer begins first by contrasting to the Tosafos. And then the Rebbe is going to go to the beer and the Rambam. So it's basically Dalid. We're going to learn Dalid in the beginning of Hay. Or it's Dalid in the beginning of Hay. Rebbe has a whole beautiful pilpul on the Gemara and Yuma and the Mefarshim there, but we'll leave that for when we learn Yuma. Yeah. Rashi Yuma says a similar thing. Anyway, okay. Says the Rebbe like this, the explanation Yuvim will understand the beer will understand how the Rambam allows for an extra amma to exist in the Beis Mikdash, changing the dimensions on the ground upon which these various different levels of holiness are on. So that's the Rambam's view. Now the Hine, because the Inyan HaParoches Hazeh, with regard to this curtain, Matzinu B'Kra, we find in the pasuk Kamal Lashonis different expressions. This is the commandment as it is in the Mishkan, right? The Gemara says later, we learned this last week and we'll learn it again shortly. The Gemara says that either you have to have it a wall like the Beis Mikdash, or you have to have it as a curtain like the Mishkan. So here is the Mishkan describing this what becomes later the Amatraxin, but in the times in the Mishkan was just a curtain. This division between the Heichel, basically the division between the Kodesh Kodashim and that which is outside. What's the nature of this division? So, says the Rebbe, we find different expressions in the pasuk. It's in the first command, Parshas Truma, the pasuk says, and this curtain will be a separation for you between Kodesh Kodashim, between that which is holy and that which is holy of holies. Okay, so what's the nature of this partition? Just that, a partition, separation between levels of holiness. Havdalah, separation. But later in Parshas Pekudei, in the command to erect the Beis Mikdash, erect the Mishkan, it says, you shall place in there, in the Holy of Holies, in the Kodesh Kodashim, the Aron Eidos, the Ark of the Covenant, right? Because in there in the Aron is the Luchos, which is the covenant, the Eidos between us and Hashem. The Sarkos, and you should cover it, ala Aron es Parochos, on the Aron the Parochos. So as if to say, what's the nature of this Parochos? To hide the Luchos, independent of being a separation between two levels of holiness. Right? That's what he's going to tell us. There's two different yonim here. And when it comes to the actual building in Parshas Vayakel, Parshas Pekudei also, Vayavar esa Aron ela Mishkan, they brought the Aron into the Mishkan, V'yasam es Parochos hamasach, and they put the covering partition by Yasach al Aron Eidos, and it covered up the Aron Eidos. So Vahainu, this is to say, says the Rebbe, sheyesh ne'inyan b'parochos. There are two different elements to this division between to this amatraxin, to this parochos. Aleph mechitza mabelas ben hakadosh ben kodesh hakadoshim. Number one is to be a division between levels of holiness, kodesh and kodesh hakadoshim. Ubeis, number two, masach ala aron, a concealment, a covering over the aron. Two different inyanim. Now, Pizi yesh l'dayin. Now, the Rebbe is going to cite to our Tosafos. Pizi yesh la'ayin, bedin amatraxin shebayis rishon. So, if that's the nature of the parochos as it was in the Mishkan, now let's see how we would apply that to the wall that stood in the first Beis Mikdash. Now, the Pashtus, considering that Harei Kivan Shemakim because this amatraxin is in lieu of the parochos that stood in the Mishkan, but only because now it's a physical wall, it's a full building, not just a temporary. Rebbe makes this distinction later between the temporary versus the permanent. But because it's a permanent building, no longer a temporary structure, so now instead of a curtain, it's a full wall. But we have to still maintain that amatraxin also had to have these two inyanim that existed in the parochos. A division between the two levels of holiness, between the Heichel and the Kodesh Kodashim. The Gam Masach al Aron, and it also served the purpose of concealing the Aron. And this is the meaning of the word traxin. The two meanings mentioned in our Tosafos that we learned last week. As Rashi in Yuma quotes from the Yerushalmi, that the word traxin comes from inside and outside. That's what Rashi says. Now, Tosafos in Yuma, he says there are a second explanation. That there are those that translate the word traxin to mean Turku Gali. Turku means to conceal. it would conceal that which is inside of it, which is the luchos that were given at Sinai. And this is what we learned in our Rashi, in our Tosafos. Tract sin, tract to hide sin, that which comes from Sinai. So you look in footnote 37, never quotes to our Gemoro, to our Tosafos. We're Bava Basra Sham, and the Gemoro and Basra over there, which you mentioned earlier, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, our Gemoro. Dibra HaMaskal now, the same Dibra HaMaskal, Tosafos, Traxin, second to last Tosafos on our page. We're there, B'Shem Rabbeinu Tam. Over there, he says it not B'Shem Yesh Mefarshim as he does in Yuma, but he says that the second Pirush is from Rabbeinu Tam. And there, the Gemara, here in our Gemara, says Tosafos, Kloimar, meaning to say, Shaya Mafsik, the Stoigers HaLuchos, it would break off and conceal the Luchos, Shenitnu B'Sinai, which is given by at Sinai, Shaya Menachis Ba'arin, which was in the Arin, Shahaya B'Beis Kodesh Kadoshim, that was in the Kodesh Kadoshim. Okay. So now these two Pirushim allude to the two different inyanim that Amatraxim. The Pirush is upon the V'chotz, according to the explanation that says that the wall, that the traxim comes from the word inside and outside. We might say quite simply, because it's a wall that divides between the inside and the outside. And that's where the word traxim comes from the word inside and outside. Somehow, I'm not sure how, but somehow traxim means inside and outside. Maybe I should look up the Yerushalmi, maybe there it gives some explanation. I don't know. So if the word traxim means inside and outside, it means to say a separation between that which is inside and that which is outside, between the Kodesh Kodashim and the Kodesh. It's a division between levels of holiness. And the explanation brought in Tosafos, both in Yuma and in Basra, our Tosafos, in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, where there it says traxim means to hide that which comes from Sinai. That is the other inyan of the Parechas, or the other inyan of the Amatraxim, to be a concealment of the Kodesh, the Aron. So in both Pirushim, both are valid, but the question is, what's the emphasis? Is the emphasis that it's a division between the levels of holiness, the first Pirush of Traxim, or that it's a concealment, it's a shield for the Aron in the second Pshat in Traxim. According to Rashi, that the Ikir Inyan is that it's a division between the two levels, therefore he calls Traxim by Pana B'chutz, as opposed to the other Pirush and Tosafos, where the Ikir is that it's a shield on the Aron. So really at this point, we have the Rebbe's comments on our Gemara. There's the rest of it's all Pilpul and Yuma. This is really the only comments that makes in gleaning from our Gemara, a little bit elsewhere as well, but this is basically it. But just to finish the Inyan, because Rebbe asked the question on the Rambam based on our Shittmim, which is how the Rambam allows for a change in the dimensions of the Beis Mikdash, based on our Shittmim, which explains that once the land has been sanctified, it cannot change status. So says the Rebbe, hey, we'll just do the first paragraph. We might suggest as the Rebbe that the Rambam has a different opinion. These two inyanim mentioned above, that exists in the Parochas, that exists in the Parochas in the Mishkan, the two inyanim, and as it's then transposed into the Amatraxim. It's only a secondary detail to what's truly happening in the Mishkan and the Mikdash with the space. Namely, the secondary details are it's a wall that services the Kodesh Kadashim in separating it from the lower level of Kodesh, or conceals and shields the Aron. But so what's the other Inyan? This is only a secondary Inyan. So what's the real Inyan? The Rambam holds the Amatraxim in the base of Mikdash is not the same as the Perek in the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, Taka right, there's two different Yonim here. But when it comes to the base of Mikdash, it's different. Because Shaparoiches, the paroiches, the curtain that existed in the Mishkan, kishma kein hi, as its name is, it's a paroiches. It only serves just as a division, partition. That's what a curtain is, a partition. Oy kemasach ala aron, or as a guard over the aron. Avala amatraxin. But this wall, this thick wall, the amatraxin, this wide wall, yesh bagam makom b'fnei atzmai. It takes up its own space. Shu chefetz b'fnei atzmai. It's its own entity. It's its own level of kedusha. So in other words, in the Rambam's opinion, there's 3 levels of kedusha. There's the kedusha of the kodesh, there's the kedusha of the kodesh kedashim, and there's the kedusha of the amatraxin, even in bayis rishon. Which means, therefore, but also happen to also service the 2 things. Havdalah ben kodesh kedashim, and v'chein masach ala aron. Avazar rak pulasa. That's only its effect, not that etzim gid. That's not what it is. And Rabbi basically argues and goes on to say that the amatraxin, in the Rambam's opinion, has its own geder. It's its own section of the Beis Hamikdash, and because it's its own section of the Beis Hamikdash, because in the second Beis Hamikdash they were in doubt as to where this amma came out of. Did it come out of the 20 of the Kodesh Kodashim, or did it come out of the 40 of the Kodesh? Then had they put that amma into one of those, then they would be diminishing from the Kodesh Kodashim. Because the amatraxin is its independent level of kedusha, that's an intermediary between the kedusha of the kodesh and the kedusha of the kodesh kedashim. If they were to put that amatraxin in the 20 of the kodesh kedashim, that would be a diminishment of 20 amas of kodesh kedashim. And if they were to put that amma into the 40 of the heichal, then that would be a diminishment of the 40 that belongs to heichal, depending on how it was in the Beis Hamikdash, in the bayis rishon. Which means, in the Rambam's view, in the bayis rishon, either one of 2 options existed. You had 39 amas of heichal, 1 amma of amatraxin, and then 20 amas of kodesh kedashim. Or you had 40 amas of heichal, 1 amma of amatraxin, and 19 amas of kodesh kedashim. And because in the second Beis Hamikdash they're not sure where this amma belonged, if they put it into either of them, they would be diminishing either the 40 of the heichal that existed in the bayis rishon or the 20 of the kodesh kedashim. Either way, they might be diminishing. And therefore, better to move the heichal over an amma and not diminish its actual size. Even though we're foregoing the shiטמ thing here, which says you cannot change the kedusha on the ground, but better do that than to actually diminish the size of the actual rooms. Following? Okay, so it's a shtickle chiddush in the Rebbe, and you can look up the Sicha Tzavei Geshmak HaSicha. The Rebbe goes through a whole pilpul, and the Rambam and the Gemoro and Yuma. Okay, so that's so far as negate to our Gemara. Now let's go back to our Gemara. Gimel Amud Beis. So at this point, the Gemara says that why don't they have the amatraxin as a full wall in the second Beis Hamikdash? Says the Gemara, the reason is because it's too tall. It's 100 amas high. And 100 amas high, a 6 tefachim wide wall cannot hold a 100 amas high wall. It can only hold a 30 amas high wall, not a 100 amas high wall. This is the Gemara's answer at the moment why they didn't have the amatraxin in the second Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara asks, so top of the page, Gemara base. The nebet plus an aman, let us then make 30 amas, the binyan of an actual building, as it should be, and that 30 amas could stand on 6 tefachim. That's the Gemara established already, as it stood in the base of as it stood in the bayis rishon, 6 amas wide, held 30 amas of the amatraxin in the bayis rishon. So do 30 amas high in the second Beis Hamikdash, the idach, and the rest, the other 70, now the paroiches, make it a paroiches. Gemara's question. Answers the Gemara, ki koi klosin amsa, how does 30 amas stand? Nami agav kikro maziva. It stands also when you have a wall, when you have a roof and plaster on the top holding it down. So now how do you read this Gemara? This statement, right? So the Gemara's answer is like this. Why can't you make 30 amas tall and then 70 amas of curtain? Because those 30 amas won't stand because it doesn't have the roof holding it down. So at this point in the Gemara, if it had a wall, if in the first Beis Hamikdash, let's just say, where it had a roof and plaster holding it in place, could that wall have stood on 5 tefachim, or did it need the 6 tefachim? Well, it depends how you understand this Gemara. Is the Gemara saying that another way in which 30 tvachim could stand is if it has a wall, has a roof. Or the pashtus, the Gemara seems to be saying that in addition to 6 amas, you also need a roof, which is why it only stood in the first Beis Hamikdash, not in the second Beis Hamikdash. In the second Beis Hamikdash, they couldn't get away with making a 30 amas high wall on 6 tvachim of width because it wouldn't stand. It only stands in the first Beis Hamikdash where you have also a roof. So if you learn that way, then that would mean a wall of 30 amas high needs 2 conditions to stand. A, 6 tvachim, B, a roof on top. That's one way of understanding this Gemara. The Gemara is saying you need both to stand. That even the 30 amas that stood in the Beis Hamikdash Rishon, which had 6 tvachim, it also needed a roof it also needed a roof to hold it down. And then for the second Beis Hamikdash, which had 6 tvachim, because it's a full amma, but didn't have a roof at the end of 30 amas, therefore the wall couldn't stand even at 30 amas. And that's why they made a curtain the whole way, and not 30 amas curtain and 30 amas wall and 70 amas curtain. Clear? So let's see Tosafos. Now go back to Gimel Modal from the bottom of Tosafos. Where the Gemara gave its original answer. And the Gemara said, Shiny Hasam V'ika Tefach Yiseda. The Gemara asked, why is it that the Amatraxin was able to stand in this first Beis Hamikdash? How is it possible that 30 amas high wall could stand on 6 tvachim when L'chura, according to our Mishnah, you're required to have 5 tvachim per 4 amas, which means 8 amas need 10 tvachim and so on and so forth. And the Gemara answered that the reason why it's able to stand 30 amas is because the extra tefach gives it extra height. And Rashi said, once you have the extra tefach, you don't need to have 5 tvachim per 4 amas. So it says Tosafos, when the Gemara gives that first answer, which says that once you hit 6 tvachim width, you hit that critical mass of width, now you can go much higher. And if we can go over to 30 amas, says Tosafos, the Gemara could have also answered the agav tikro maziva, that as a result of the roof and the plaster on top, koi tvei could stand higher than 4 amas. The Gemara is going to say later. What's Tosafos saying here? That the Gemara didn't need to say that you require to have 6 tvachim to stand the 30 amas. Because you don't. All you need is a roof in place. So Tosafos seems to be saying it's either or. Either the Gemara could have answered as it did, that the extra tefach makes it stand 30 amas high, or the Gemara gives another answer. The Gemara could have given another answer. That the reason why it stands is because it has a roof and plaster holding it in place. What's the practical difference? The practical difference is like this. If I take a kinyan that I'm going to build for you a 30 amas high gazes, how wide do I have to make that wall? And I'm making it between our properties. So there's no wall, there's no roof and plaster holding it down. It's a freestanding wall. How wide does it have to be? According to Tosafos, all it needs is 6 tvachim. L'chura. It's either or. Because the Gemara answered this way, that 6 tvachim holds it up. Or the Gemara could have also answered that the roof holds it up. But it answered this way. As if to say they're independent answers. That's how I'm reading it. Maybe I'm reading Tosafos wrong here. That's what it seems to me. Tosafos is saying it's either or. Either the extra tefach will make it stand 30 amas, or the roof and thing. And it could have answered that the roof holds it up. And then if you have a roof, you don't need the 6 tvachim. 5 tvachim is enough. Because the roof holds it in position. Which would mean then if partners split and they made a kinyan to build a 30 amas high wall, all they need is 6 tvachim wide. But if, however, the Gemara's answer that the roof holds it in place is not in replacement of the answer of 6 tvachim, but in addition, then in addition to 6 tvachim, you also need to have a roof holding it up. If that's the case, then if I promise to build a wall for you, a gazes wall of 30 amas high, 6 tvachim is not wide enough, it'll fall. Because it has no roof to hold it in place. It's a freestanding wall, requires more width. How much, I don't know. But 6 tvachim certainly isn't enough. Because it lacks the other condition, the roof. Whereas Tosafos is splitting the two, saying it's 2 options how the Gemara could have answered the same question. I hope that's somewhat clear. I could be wrong about reading the Tosafos, but that's what it seems to me. Otherwise, I don't see any and you'll see in the next Tosafos, you'll see also a similar kind of thing. Otherwise, I don't see what Tosafos is adding. What's Tosafos changing? By saying the Gemara could have answered a different way, and I'm like, okay, so the Gemara could have answered a different way. We're going to read it in 2 minutes. We're going to read it in 2 minutes. In 5 lines from now, we're going to read it. You don't have to tell. Tosafos doesn't have to foreshadow or spoiler alert. He's going to tell you an answer that's coming later. It seems that Tosafos is telling you that answer is appropriate here too, as if to say both are legit conditions, which actually makes sense in that in previous Tosafos, I think we looked at last week, where Tosafos struggled with this idea that why does the Gazet need such a wide wall? We see other walls that stand higher. And he said, if you want to maintain according to the standard of what Gazet is, when you promise to make a Gazet, blah, 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 you have to make it this height. You have to make it this width. But Tosafos himself, l'chatchila, was troubled with this notion that you have to make it so wide. So it seemed as if Tosafos is on the engineering end of, it doesn't need that much width if you make a proper wall. And therefore, okay, you can make a 30 tvachim high wall with 6 tvachim. It's okay, without a roof. It's okay, you can do it. And the Gemara's answer is either or. Either the roof will help you hold it at that height, or the extra tefach will help you hold it at that height. Maybe. Okay, weiter in the Gemara. Okay, if it's not clear, please jump in. The Gemara asks, now we're Gimel on the base, continuing in the Gemara. The fifth line. Why not build a wall at whatever height you can possibly get to? So it's not going to be 30 amas because you don't have a roof holding it in place. See, this line makes it as if you have to have both. Anyway, so why not make it as high as you possibly can go, whatever height that is? Let's say it's 20 amas, 35, whatever it is. But however high you can go, relying on 6 tvachim width. But have an idach pareches and make the rest of it curtain. That at least some of it will be wall as it was supposed to be, and as it was in the base Rishon, in the first base Midrash. So Amar Abaye, Elo Amar Abaye, the little aleph there, and if you have that, but in some versions of the Gemara it says Elo Amar Abaye, and it would make sense that Tosafos also learns with the word Ella. Elo Amar Abaye, but Abaye says, Mili, we have it by tradition that ikulu babinyan, that this amatraxin is either entirely a structure, a building, ikulu b'pareches, or it's entirely a curtain. You can't have a mix of both. Ikulu babinyan in mikdash, we derive the idea that it can be entirely a wall from the way it was in the base Rishon, ikulu b'pareches, or it could be entirely a pareches, mishkan from the way it was in the Mishkan. So in the second base Midrash, they went because they couldn't do entirely wall because it's 100 amas high, and 100 amas even with a roof. 6 tvachim, 100 amas is not enough. You would have to go much wider. Therefore, they couldn't make binyan. Therefore, they went with pareiches. And as we looked in the Shichot from the Gemoro Yuma, there was 2 pareiches, one at the beginning of the amma, one at the end of the amma. Okay, so let's see the Tosafos. Amar Abaye Gemidi. Abaye says we have it by tradition that the amatraxin must either be entirely a structure or entirely a curtain. You can't have both. And this explains why they didn't do partial wall and partial curtain. The first answer, when the Gemara suggested that the wall should be 30 amas high to rely on the 6 tvachim and the rest 70 amas of curtain, the Gemara rejected it by saying that the 30 amas high wall needs a roof to hold it in place, even with the 6 tvachim. Right, so you can't say either or. That's why it's disturbing me. Anyway, that was the Gemara's first answer. The Gemara's first answer is the reason why they didn't build 30 amas and then 70 the rest, 70 tvachim rest, 70 tvachim of 70 amas of pareiches of curtain rest, because even the 30 amas high 6 tvachim wide wall requires the roof to hold it in place. That was the Gemara's original answer. Then the Gemara said, okay, don't go to 30 amas, go as high as you can, whatever it is, 25, 20, whatever it is, you can go do that. And the Gemara answered by saying that you have to have it either entirely wall or entirely curtain, no mix and match. So Amar Abaye community, that's what Abaye says. Says Hashta now that we've come to the conclusion that the amatraxin either has to be entirely of structure, a wall, or entirely curtain, no mix and matching. The Gemara does not need the original answer that the 30 amas needs a roof to hold it in place. We no longer need an answer. Right? The Gemara said before that why can't you make why didn't they make 30 amas of wall and then 70 amas of curtain? Because the 30 amas wall needs a roof to hold it down. But now that we've come to the conclusion that you cannot mix and match, then you don't need that at all. The reason why they didn't do a 30 amas wall is not because it couldn't have been held by the roof. Maybe it could stand, but because in order to have mix and match. Why does Tosafos do that? What's the point of the Tosafos? It seemed to me that Tosafos is there to make the point I was making earlier. Because had you not had this Tosafos, you would have to assume that the 30 amas high wall wasn't made in the second base of Midrash because it couldn't stand unless it had a roof, which would mean you have to have 6 tefachim plus roof. But now Tosafos is saying, no, you don't need that answer anymore. Tosafos is as if saying a 30 amas wall without a roof will stand. Because we don't need that answer anymore that it has to have roof and 6 tefachim. 6 tefachim and 30 amas will stand. And you don't have to have the answer which says that you need a roof and 6 tefachim, because the reason why they didn't do it is because you can't mix and match. That's what Tosafos is adding this. To make this Tosafos plus Tosafos before it makes me assume that Tosafos is saying a 6 tefachim wide wall will stand 30 amas. The Gemara said at one point that the reason why they didn't make 30 amas high wall by the second base of Midrash is because it didn't have a roof. That answer has been rejected because now we have a new answer. That the reason why they didn't make a 30 amas high wall, even though it would have stood, is because you can't mix and match. And that's what Tosafos means to say when he says, now that we've been introduced to the second answer of Abaye, we no longer need the first one. We no longer need to assume that a 30 amas high wall won't stand unless it has a roof. It could stand if it has 6 tefachim. That's l'chura what these two Tosafos mean to do over here. Again, I'm not 100% sure of it. I struggle with it today, and you can see I'm still struggling with it, but I think this is the right approach. Okay. Okay, we basically reviewed the Gemara and added some biurim from the Rebbe. We didn't really have time to finish the Gemara here, as I was hoping to. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to conclude this Gemara and then go weiter into the next sugya. Okay, of course, any comments, questions, feel free. Good night, Thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed this Geschmack.
Thank you.
As much as I did. Good night,
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.